Hi, everybody. I wanted to just talk a little bit more about goals, objectives, and outcomes because I think if you haven't noticed already, you may notice that there's a little bit of um, conflicting information. In the video that I posted for you, that's from the Center for Advancement of Learning, you will have seen them post this. Inverted triangle that talks about goals kind of as the overarching thing, objectives a little bit more specific, and outcomes even more specific. But if you did your reading from the textbook, it actually says a little bit of the opposite when it comes to objectives and outcomes. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit more about that and clarify that a little bit for you. So, from a technical standpoint, what has been talked about in the video from the Center for Advancement of Learning as far as goals being more broad, general, abstract statements over a longer period of time that kind of go across curriculum when we're talking specifically about curriculum or program, that would be correct as far as goals are concerned. Objectives are kind of the next level, which should be written as SMART objectives, which is kind of the next piece of this module. They are more narrow, they're more precise, they're concrete, they're measurable, and they speak to intended learning in the course. They are tied to instructional materials. So what is it that we're going to teach in this course to help our students meet the goals? Okay. And then outcomes are tied to student work. So what is the student going to do to demonstrate that they have met the objectives that then lead to meeting the goals? Okay. So that's kind of your more technical, by the textbook definition of these three terms. However, if you look at what Billings and Halstead say, they take the terms objectives and outcomes, and this is kind of where you're going to see some conflict. It's specifically with these two terms, objectives and outcomes. Goals, most people kind of get that right. It's when we start talking about objectives and outcomes where we start getting kind of mixed up a little bit. These two terms kind of start getting used interchangeably quite a bit. So Billings and Halstead talk about these two terms in the opposite of what is talked about by the Center for Advancement of Learning. And they say that outcomes are less restrictive. Outcomes are less restrictive than objectives, and that they're actually more appropriate when you're talking about student-centered or learner-centered environments or classrooms. And so they kind of advocate for actually using outcomes as opposed to objectives. The other thing that I want you, if you haven't already noticed, you may notice when you start looking at the way that TWU structures our materials, we have program outcomes. So what we expect to happen for our learners by the time they graduate or when they graduate from their programs. And then we have student learning outcomes, which is what we use of what we expect our learner to achieve when they finish a course. So it's a course level outcome that we expect. And we don't really use objectives at all. You may see some faculty use modular objectives. So here's what we expect the students to do in this module. Or you may see objectives used with particular assignments. So the objective of this assignment is blah, 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 blah. So, but that's not consistent, and it's not prescribed by the university that we do it that way. But what is prescribed by the university are the program goals and then the student learning outcomes at the course level. So I think the real takeaway points that I want you to come away with. I wanted to give you kind of a broad knowledge so that you have it in your arsenal of knowledge. But I think the big things I want you to come away with are to know, number one, wherever you are, what terms are being used and how are they being implemented. And then secondly, know that these terms can be used interchangeably. So think about, okay, how are we using it here? What should I be doing in order to have the best learning experience for my students? And then make sure that whatever objectives or outcomes you are using are written at appropriate levels for the student, that your learning experiences are being geared towards whatever the outcomes or objectives you're trying to get to are, and that they're written so that they are understandable and so that they guide, like I just said, they guide the evaluation, because the evaluation, what you are evaluating, needs to be lined up with either those objectives or outcomes that you're trying to get your students to achieve. So I hope that helps clarify just a little bit, and don't let this confuse you to the point that it paralyzes you.